Welcome everyone to today's edition of Frontier Opening Bell. I am Bosun Amofaye, and on the show this morning, Ali Khan Sacho, the CEO of Rich Frontiers Management at Vetiver Capital at Rich Frontiers Management in Nairobi. I was looking at Chima Okadike, who is Vetiver Capital Management Research Analyst in charge of Consumer Goods Analysis. Good morning to both of you. Chima, good morning. Great to have you also. Great to have you also, Ali. Thank you very much from Rich Frontiers. Thank you. Let's do a very quick run as we get the show up and running with the Friday market close. Just a reminder of how we closed the market for the final trading day of last week. Of course, we're starting today, the first trading day of the final full trading week in the month of May. Thank you so much also for coming through on the show. Uchenna Menis,
thank you,
managing partner at Howard Menis Asset Management. Okay, so this is a quick rundown. We got Nigeria down nearly 3%, a very sharp fall last week. Ivory Coast was better by nearly 1%. Egyptian market 0.75% in the green. Kenya softened about 0.13%. South African GSE by 0.2% on Friday. Within the North African market, the East African market, which of course gives you Ethiopia telecommunication story. I'm sure early everyone is pouring over this Safaricom consortium with Vodacom paying $850 million to the Ethiopian authorities to secure that telecommunications license. A raft of our shareholders meeting this week in East Africa, Kenyan market, Absa, Standard Chartered, Nimuruti, KCB, and the rest of them. So quite a whole lot today. We'll talk about that. What the outlook is. We have a lot to chew about through the end of the week. Good news for Airtel and MTN, because Bank of Uganda has given them payment providers licenses. Absa Bank of Kenya says its profit after tax in the first quarter was 2.28 billion. Is there a turnaround now for Kenyan banks in Q1 against what we saw last year? Let's start with Yellow Ethiopian telecommunication with Safaricom. Ali.
Yes, good morning and thank you. So obviously this was the very big story. The Ethiopian government accepting the bid from the Safaricom, Vodacom, Vodafone, UK CDC and Sumitomo consortium, which bid about 26 to 27% more than the other consortium led by MTN. I suspect the Ethiopians are leaving it open for MTN to come and raise their bid to the same level as Safaricom. Market got excited this morning. Price got up to 41.50, which is close to a record. But on low volume, I tend to think a lot of it is priced in. Look, Ethiopia is a big market, over 100 million people, an enormous opportunity. Safaricom understands how to operate in the Horn of Africa. I mean, Kenya is not Ethiopia, but you know, they have a pretty good understanding of the landscape, the politics, and how to operate. I think, personally, I would prefer to see Safaricom go the orange route, which was to take a stake in Ethio Telecom, which is also available for sale, because I think by doing that, you would control the speed with which the mobile money license was released. At the moment, Safaricom have a promise that the mobile money license will be released to them, but no guarantee on that front. And you know, if you look at these businesses, mobile money is seriously the cherry on top of the cake. So, but overall, good optimism. They're getting their foot in the door. I'm sure they can navigate their way to getting that license reasonably quickly, and a lot of excitement around here. Of course, this is against a backdrop of quite intense political and geopolitical things happening. Secretary Blinken has just imposed some sanctions on members of the Ethiopian government, Amara militia, and TPLF members. So, but you know, if anyone knows how to operate in this neighborhood and has the neighborhood's DNA, it's Safaricom. So I think overall I'm optimistic. Share price, I think, probably priced in. Today's pop might not last, but overall an important step forward, important expansion for what is Kenya's biggest company. Absa Kenya registering a 2.28 billion profit after tax in Q1. Absa was the most aggressive of the tier 1 banks in its credit provisioning, and therefore, by extension, is going to see the best improvement in this year's profits. So this is expected by me. I think they'll continue to look good this year, primarily in part because of that very aggressive provisioning that they did last year. It's a good business. They've got a solid franchise. There is talk of them offloading the asset management business to Motsepe, Patrick Motsepe, which is an interesting development I saw last week. Crown Paints, one of the companies that's delayed their full year results for quite a while. They're going through a rights issue, $7 million is the scale of it. Bank of Uganda issuing licenses to Airtel and MTN as payment providers. As we said about Safaricom, the sexy part of the telecom business is the payments and mobile money business. And it's interesting to see both Airtel and MTN going in that direction. Airtel, of course, are separate, have taken in investors into Airtel Money a few weeks ago as they look to exploit that opportunity. Merge, Solid Oak Insurance declaring an interim dividend of $250,000. Merge, of course, little nimble, small exchange, but doing lots of interesting things. They were actually most ahead of the curve in the crypto space, but currently the crypto market is under some significant pressure, as we all know.
Yes, Bitcoin is, crypto is getting a little bit whacked as Uche now will talk to us a little bit about that this morning and take us to the global space, which is coming through with a very cautious mode this morning. Again, no one is really sure what China is doing and what Elon Musk is doing. There's some tweets a few minutes ago about how much Tesla actually lost in Q1 on the back of the Bitcoin thing and all of that. Hold on a second, Uche. Now let's go to Nigerian market space. And the big story that Uche at Chima Okadike of Vertiva will speak to us about is the Nigeria's GDP numbers that came through yesterday evening, 0.5%. What's the view from Vertiva Capital? What we knew was that Vertiva will be releasing a note later today. What will it contain? What's the outlook on second quarter? We want you to talk to us on that. Uche, Chima, let's listen to you first.
Good morning. Thank you, Boston. So we can see the GDP numbers that were released yesterday. Can see that GDP grew 0.51% compared to the previous year, which is very positive. It just shows that there is a slow but definite recovery from the pandemic that we had witnessed in the previous year. If we look across the drivers of this growth, we can see at the fore the usual drivers. We saw the telecommunications sector, also the manufacturing sector, the construction sector, and the likes. The reasons for these are not very far-fetched. We know that telecom sector has been, mainly driven by tech and has been a very strong proponent of growth in the Nigerian economy. Also looking at the, really, if you look at the whole results, we can see, I think it's a reflection of consumer behavior after an economic shock. Because if we look at what really drove, we can see the manufacturing sector also grew. And if we look deeply or look into what drove that growth, we can see mostly the food, beverage, and tobacco segment of that sector. And it just shows that when incomes are really affected, consumers tend to delay or defer big ticket items and go for the everyday needs and sustenance. So that's why I think we saw that sector grow significantly. Also, in terms of the oil sector, we saw that decline slightly, although we know that that is mostly from the cuts that were duly mandated by the OPEC body. And we know, despite rising prices, although rising prices also affected it because as prices were rising, people were not able to demand as much, even though demand is also still improving globally with improving economic conditions. Our outlook for Q2 will look mainly at firstly at the food, beverage, and tobacco segment. We can see the improvements that we had in Q1, and in Q2 we are hopeful, or we're optimistic that the lower base we saw in Q1 or in Q2 last year, which was when we saw the full effect of the pandemic manifested in the lockdowns and unemployment figures rising and reduction in income. Although incomes are still low, unemployment numbers are still slightly elevated. We think that, from the numbers we've seen, the economy is improving and incomes are slightly improved somewhat. So we expect that volumes will still improve in line with this, and we expect that to drive growth in the next quarter. Also, we remain confident on the telecommunications sector, which has been a main driver for growth. We're also confident or optimistic on the agricultural sector, whose contribution to GDP improved within the 1 year period. Also, we're looking at the construction sector, and I think that's it for our outlook for GDP in Q2.
Thank you so much, Uchima Ukadike. We'll have a whole lot to talk today, and it's going to be a busy week for all of you, all of us, by the way, because the MPC meeting starts today, so they've got inflation from last week to digest. Then they've got the GDP. They will have Monday, Tuesday, so it's a very busy week. Uchenna, let me just let's throw in a bit of a conversation around the global marketplace here. What's going on really with Bitcoin and the European market starting on a bit of a cautious note this week? What are you looking at in currency space as well?
Right. I think what we're seeing now is and some sort of highlights really to investors and market participants that markets really just don't stay going higher and higher with no recourse lower, and in that regard, you can see that people are now starting to pay attention to really what has been driving pricing, and that's what we can see from the cryptocurrency place. That it's clearly a speculative bubble. How it would bust, really, no one understands that, but it's clear right now that institutions or institutional funds are starting to take a backseat now to understand that, well, maybe we've just been putting money in these things, but we never had any fundamental to work with, and we're seeing that sort of caution also driving into high yielding assets in the US and also in Europe market, as investors are taking caution to understand that, well, this free should I say money in terms of yield on this high yielding asset is not necessarily going to be that way. And there is still some talk when it comes to the Fed looking to taper, as Janet Yellen also highlighted in a speech that, well, there is a risk of overheating the economy if you just continue to keep rates significantly lower at this point, really. So right now, right, from a macroeconomic point of view, I think we're starting to near some sort of paradigm shift, really, which I don't think the financial market at large is prepared for, really, Boston.
Okay, thank you, Uchenna. We appreciate that, this global perspective. So we'll get back to you in just a very quick sec later to give you an outlook on the MPC for the week as we digest our GDP, and the last inflation went down, GDP went up. Looks like both positive news. How should this go into the MPC decisions tomorrow? Let's touch on with the Southern African markets quickly. I want Ali to weigh in on any of this corporate news from Investec, getting Vanessa Olva, this very distinguished woman, on the board of Investec Bank. Old Mutual first quarter result from operations 1.81 billion rand, nearly 50%. That looks like good news for good old Mutual. Dis-Chem Pharmacies revenue 26.3 billion in full year 2020. Of course, we all know what pharmacies and drugs were for last year. Pan-African Resources in mining reporting production guidance of gold production for the period ahead of us. Malawi is building the first solar storage project. I like that. Don't you, Ali?
Absolutely. I think, I had high hopes for the new president of Malawi. He was extremely articulate and got me all excited. But they're making some moves now. That is one of them. They're legalizing the growth of marijuana. So I think, let's keep an eye on those folks down south, because I think they're trying to be nimble and plug into these opportunities. Malawi, of course, has a very low production of electricity, and there is an enormous opportunity to add more onto the grid. If I jump to Pan-African Resources, full year 21 production guidance up 195,000 ounces of gold, it's quite interesting to follow on what was being said from a macro perspective. We've seen the gold price rally quite sharply now. I think we're at close to early January highs. I think there's been a major shift. This whole story about digital gold, the Bitcoin story, people were buying Bitcoin as a potential replacement for gold, is reversing quite dramatically. And therefore, I think for the gold price in particular, I'm looking for a new record into the close of the year, and that will be very supportive of gold and silver mining companies. And I think increasingly we'll see more positive developments on that front. I was taken aback. That I thought was a very strong first quarter result out of Old Mutual. This is a big behemoth, a presence in many markets. And that tells us that not only is the core business very solid, they know their ground, but also that we're seeing some kind of recovery, not only out of South Africa, but also out of the rest of Africa. And I think that's a positive piece of news.
Thank you so much. Let me weigh in on the Nigeria's MPC meeting. What's the outlook for Chima Nkadike, considering that inflation deep dive slightly, GDP went up in Q1? Do you think there are enough reasons here for the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank to cut rates?
I think that the Monetary Policy Committee will hold rates as is currently. The reason is, I think it's mainly due to the inflation reports we got last week, where we saw that prices didn't rise as fast as we have been used to. So I think the MPC will take advantage of this and try to see how well the good news of GDP will filter down into the economy, and see how long they can, maintain status quo until they are no longer able to. So I think the MPC will hold rates after its today meeting. Also, if I can speak on the GCR assigning national scale long and short-term issuer rating to international breweries, I just say that our outlook for international breweries is quite positive, very optimistic. We know that the company has been loss-making in recent years after its merger with Farbod and Interfact Breweries. Gross margins, both gross and operating, have been very weak and declining. Also, apart from that, we saw that finance costs have been very huge, mostly because they have huge debts on their books. However, we saw also in at the beginning of 2020, where the company issued had a rights issue and was able to, clear off most of those debts. And what they have now is mostly short-term debts, although that short-term debt is mostly US dollar-denominated debts, and they are kind of exposed to foreign exchange fluctuations. They still have a lot of debts in their books, and that will most likely affect their finance costs. However, on the other hand, we saw that the company in 2018 were able to spend a lot on their capital expenditure, on their capex at their Shagamu Brewery plant, and so they still have a lot of capacity that they are yet to utilize. So we do not expect them to, spend a lot more on capex going forward. That leaves a lot of cash for them from their cash flow for them to service many of their finance expenses and their debts. So going forward, we are very optimistic on the company's liquidity profile, and we think that the A rating is quite earned.
Thank you. Chima, Uchenna, very quickly, give me your outlook on interest rate decision tomorrow.
I think the central bank will look to hold, really. I think that will be should I say, in my own opinion, by cautionary stance towards our monetary policy. And we should get to understand this, Boston. We're coming from a place where the bar was very, very low, right? So when we jump some sort of positive economic report, then we are really not looking at the whole picture, you understand? So for me, we're still in a place whereby we're just getting out of it. And to be aggressive in terms of tightening any form of monetary policy at the moment will be quite unwise, and too forward to, in my own opinion. So I expect them to hold and see what couple of macroeconomic reports would give. Then they can adjust in accordance, really, Boston.
Fantastic. Let's finish off on the northern corridor of the continent. The numbers coming through from Egypt shows that the level of non-interest banking services is beginning to rise. Egypt was reporting triple digits billions of naira figure in the month of March, which is just at the end of the first quarter of this year. That was part of the story from the North African corridor. If you keep an eye on these numbers, you'll find out that Egypt was posting about 378 billion, nearly 400 billion Egyptian pounds in the month of March. Morocco's industrial paint maker, Colorado, posting about nearly 40% in revenue in the first quarter. That's quite good news. Ali, let's give us the Sharia compliant banking. Your thoughts about this for Egypt, then we'll wrap it up on that note.
So that's a pretty impressive number. I mean, 378 billion Egyptian pounds. And I think it speaks to Egypt obviously having an oven-ready Sharia market for those who are cash rich in the region. It shows the alignment with the UAE and Saudi Arabia and others. And I think it's seriously significant. And if I was a policymaker in Abuja or in Nairobi, I'd be looking at that and saying, why aren't I getting some of this? And be working, we've talked the talk, but we haven't walked it. I certainly not in Nairobi. We've been talking about it for a few years. So I think there's a huge opportunity for African countries to tap into this liquidity that comes out of the Sharia market. I think Egypt is, as we know, doing a great job in that. If I could just touch on two other things, quite a lot of interesting geopolitical developments with Egypt at the center. You've had some very big military maneuvers in Sudan with Egypt and Sudan. And then, we've got to keep an eye on Egypt. They're doing so much in that Mediterranean economy. Really, one's got to give credit to Sisi. Seems to be a geopolitical grandmaster in many respects.
Thank you. In many respects, yes, he is, and I would give it that to him. Focused political economic reform going on there. Thank you so much, everyone, and we respect your views, and we thank you so much this morning. Ali Kansachu from Rich Frontiers Management in Nairobi. Chima Okadike, who is the head of consumer analysis at Vettiva Capital Management, and of course, Uchenna Minis, global market strategist and partner at Howard Minis Asset Management. Thank you so much. Three of you, have a great week ahead and have a great day. Thank you so much. That's Frontier Opening Bell for today. I am Bosun Amafaye. I'll see you next time.